just for clarity, I'm not a big-time miner. There are a lot of those in the room. I am more of an aspirational miner. I have 11 rigs, and I'll show you what they look like. 2 of them are S9s that dnode hosts for me, and then the rest are all GPU mines, and I'll show you what that looks like. So I wanted to start with something really simple, which is the stupid shit that I learned when building rigs that you don't have to learn on your own. You can find out from the community. So this is a picture, a really bad picture of my mining operation. It is all open air rigs like you saw up here. There's some around the room. These don't look like regular servers. They're just cases that have stuff screwed into them. So I have 9 of these. My first generation rig is 6 1060s. My second generation rig is 6 1070 Ti's. And I can talk to you a little bit about the profitability, about why I chose those. But basically what you're trying to do here is lower your ROI as much as you can. And I'll show you what my numbers look like. So the first thing is 3 rigs are fun. You know, you can put them under your desk. You can kind of ignore them. When you start getting more rigs, I have an actual problem. These are in my hallway. So it is like staring into a blow dryer. So the humidity at my place is about 10% year-round. I keep my my window open all winter with a fan blowing cold air into my house. And I run about 80 degrees. So at 80 degrees, my air conditioner kicks on in the middle of the winter. It's awesome. So 9 rigs do blow a lot of hot air. I will also tell you that I, this year, have converted to 240 volt. So my rigs all run at 240, and they all run, I run about 60 amps of power through that. So I can help you do the math about why that's better. But the efficiency is a little higher at 240 volt. And most PC power supplies are happy to be at 240 volt. Check your power supply before you plug it in, but they will switch over most of the time. So first thing is 10 rigs, which is actually I have a test rig, is really annoying if you don't do it right. So if you played with this at all, you know that your miners stop sometimes. You don't know why, or the parameter changes and suddenly they're not communicating on the network correctly. So I'm going to show you a tool that is in the community called Awesome Miner. I use Awesome Miner exclusively, and it is just a management tool. So I will give you all of those links, and I will give the link to my blog at the end where you can download the presentation with all of my notes. So I use Windows 10 Home only because it's cheap. It's 20 bucks, right? So there's no password, and most importantly, the video drivers for it are mature. So a lot of people want to use Linux. I have no problem with that, except that NVIDIA and AMD are not so great at creating video drivers for Linux. So the stability I find is there on Windows, so that's why I run Windows. All of the simple stuff you've already heard, auto login, there's no password on my machines. They're all, now I'm a security guy, so I'll tell you they're all on their own network behind a big firewall that I trust. So I don't have any concerns about that. I've also removed all the services. Only if you go into my services tab, IPv4 is it. There's no Microsoft anything. I shut off all the services I can. My goal here is not to secure the machine, is to make sure the machine doesn't screw up. So the more I can remove, the better off I am. And these are really running weak CPUs. I use Pentium CPUs. And I'll show you the rig, but they're D4400 CPUs, so it's a $40, $50 CPU. So you really don't want a lot of extra cycles going on there. I remove every bit of software. So there's Awesome Miner and MSI Afterburner. And MSI is just a utility that we use to tweak the cards. And I'll talk to you about why we use that software a little bit. But basically, I undervolt my cards. And the reason I do that is because my Gen 1 rig, the 1060 rig, I actually run that 6-card rig at 660 watts, which is awesome in my mind. Because that is really hard. Power is one of your biggest costs. So if you can get your rig to 660 watts, perfect. My Gen 2 rig is 6 1070 Ti's, and I actually have that down to 1050 watts. So a big part of my cost function is trying to get my rig to run as efficiently as possible. So I use Afterburner to help me do that. Awesome Miner I mentioned. So Awesome Miner is just a layer that runs on top. It runs SG Miner or CC Miner underneath it, or Claymore. All it does is create a configuration file, start the miner, and then get out of the way. And it monitors to make sure that it's doing the right thing. Now, I'll show you in a second. I don't care what I mine. So you'll talk to people who say, oh, I mine this or I mine that. That's awesome. I don't care. I want to mine whatever is profitable at the moment. So one of the things the Awesome Miner does for me is it goes out to what I mine or what to mine or one of the other tools and says what is most profitable right now. And it goes right. So it takes all of your CPUs or all your GPUs based on the benchmark of what they're capable of doing. It knows what the payout would be and then switches. So at any given moment, I could be mining anything. And I'll show you what that looks like. So, and then, like I said before, I isolate with a good firewall. These machines are wide open. I don't trust them, but I'm fine because they're on their own network. So don't try to run extra stuff on these. Don't try to reuse a machine. If it's a dedicated miner, strip it down, put it behind a firewall, and you're off and running. And hopefully we're coming back. All right. So things I learned. Don't set your rig on fire. This is really easy to do. So this picture is a SATA to PCI bridge. So what happens, if you think about 6 PCI cards, big video cards, they're 16-lane cards running on your motherboard. Motherboards don't have that many lanes. So we use something called a PCI bridge. It takes that 16-lane video card and funnels it down into one lane. That's how you get so many cards on your motherboard. Well, there's a specific piece of technology, a little bridge board that you can use. You'll see them around the room that do this. And one of the stupid mistakes that I made was they all require their own power. And I thought, well, there's SATA power. I've got a nice SATA cable here that has 3 or 4 connectors on. I'll just use that. Well, it's not rated for that. So I melted it and almost caused a fire. I did burn up a power supply this way. So, a couple of simple things. Try to avoid the bridge, or if you're going to use them, only put 2 on a PCI connector. That will get your power correctly. And the way I learned this is I actually called EVGA when I RMA'd my power supply, and they said, well, we can sell you some cables, some Molex cables that will make that problem go away. So all of my 1060 rigs, I went back and I retrofitted to actually have the right connector on. And so I only plugged 2 cards into one of those Molex cables. So the second part is I try to not plug more than 1 GPU into the power supply at a time, meaning all 6 are there, but they're all on their own cable. So you have 6 leads. If you have a 1,000 watt power supply, I use the EVGA, you'll have enough power coming off of there. Don't leave open spots on your power supply. You want to try to balance your load as much as you can. So I also learned a lot about power management. So constant load is different than variable load on a power supply. So what that means is if you build a gaming rig and you decide, hey, I'm only going to game a few hours a day, your power supply kind of is okay for most things, but when you start that 24-hour GPU constantly burning power, it's going to be hard on the power supply. So automatically, I take all the power calculators, and I'll show you one in the links, but you reduce it by 10%. Secondly, you have to derate your power going to the wall. So a 20-amp circuit is effectively about a 12-amp circuit when it's constant power at 240 volt. And I can show you the calculations there, but you need to derate. And the reason I know this, I had my electrician come in when I went to 240 volt, and he goes, you know, there's this conduit in my ceiling, because I have a hard loft, so everything's in conduit, and he goes, the conduit's humming, and it's hot. I'm surprised you haven't been tripping your breaker. And I go, yeah, well, I've been doing some mining. He goes, yeah, you got to stop that. So he showed me how to do it, and I'll show you the calculation he uses, but you have to do what's called derating your power. So 12 amps is effectively what you're going to get out of a 20 amp circuit. So I, again, not just set my rig on fire, almost set my house on fire.
But you pay for the 40 amps?
Yeah, so you pay, well, the 20 amp circuit is still a 20 amp circuit. You only pay for the power you use. But the capacity to trip has to be there. So when you get about 18 to 22 amps on a 20 amp circuit, you're going to trip the breaker. but when you have a constant load, you have to back that off a little bit more. So what happens is you have to build excess capacity into your cable, into your electricity, in order to supply. Now, I know Steven's here, and Steven actually runs a clean room where he builds these things in a more industrial size, so he can talk to you about power management. And I'll actually show you a PDU that I use, a power distribution unit that I use to monitor this now, because I was really concerned about screwing it up. So I have a watt meter. I can put on any individual rig, and I can see exactly how much it's using, and then I can see in aggregate how much each of my PDUs is using. All right, so assume you're doing it wrong. Does anyone here, have you ever used NiceHash? Yeah, did you lose money?
No.
So I lost about $1,000 on NiceHash because one day they got hacked. Somebody went in and emptied out all their wallets, and they sort of say, sorry about that, we'll be back after we figure it out. And
They returned back?
they did not pay me back. They say they'd pay people back, they did not pay me back.
You didn't get your 10% back?
I got nothing back. So I don't know what the hell they were talking about. I didn't get anything back. The second thing is you have to know that this is going to change. So if you're willing to take all the money that you're investing in miners and take it out to the parking lot and set it on fire, this is the thing for you. Because Bitcoin has been changing a lot in value. So the only reason to do this is because you have a gambler's intent to be a speculator, right? So I put this up here because people, you remember 19709? Who remembers 19709? It was fun, wasn't it? Did you cash anything in at 19709? I didn't. And when I look at it again, it was 6672. Now today's, I think it's 8800. So it's jumping around. Listen, if you're looking at this as an investment, don't go mortgaging your house. Don't go running up your credit cards. This is not that kind of investment. But it's fun. So if you're interested in fun, this is for you. All right. So NiceHash, I don't use. Even though they're back, they say they're stable, they say they're secure. I'm a security guy. I don't believe them. I don't use them. But I do use other pools, and I can talk to you about which pools I've been okay with. All right, so benchmarks. I know this is really small. It is on the deck. You do have access to it, but I'll show you real quickly what I did. So this is my Gen 1. So this is going to look very familiar to people who have been doing this. I can tell you my cost when I built them was $2,000 roughly. Those days are gone. You cannot buy a 1060 for that anymore. And I hit the 1070 Ti when it first came out, and Newegg loves me because they will not sell me a GPU anymore. But they sold me GPUs at a crazy cost. I think I was $460. I have the spreadsheet I can show you, but that GPU is just not available, or if it is, it's crazy. But my Gen 2 rig is $3,800 roughly. And I have 90% undervolt my GPUs. So I'm actually at 1050 watts. And those were built in December. And then I have some Bit9s, Bitmain S9s. I actually got those around $2,100, and I did wait the 2 months, and they did eventually show up magically. And we're still trying to get those up and running. But I did include some numbers. And I didn't include the Vega 64. I did take that as a flyer. They're not in production. They're on my gaming machine because they don't really pay out that well. But I'll show you my numbers. All right, so cost and power. This is per GPU. Remember, I have 6 GPUs in each rig. So my Gen 1 rig, about 108 watts each, about $223 per card at the time. And my 1070 Ti is about 155 watts, about $470 per card. So I've given you some different algorithms here. You'll notice there's some gaps because you don't mind playing more Equihash on NVIDIA's. But you'll lose some numbers there, which is why I included these. And the reason I included the ND64 is because it's a $600 card and it runs at 385 watts. So I'm not saying this is a 1080 Ti, but a 1080 Ti is similar in cost and performance for some of the numbers. Not all of them, but for some of them. So these are how they differ. And what I wanted to point out is if somebody asks you a benchmark for your card, remember it depends on the algorithm you're running. So Anthony was talking about how ASIC miners are used exclusively for Bitcoin mining if it's an S9 because they're really awesome at it, and the reason you don't use GPUs anymore is because they're not awesome at it, right? So the ASIC miners have pushed GPUs right out of Bitcoin mining. And it's because these algorithms, they all have very different numbers. And some of them are good at some algorithms, some of them are not. Some are memory intensive, some are what called CUDA cores for your AMD intensive, some are memory intensive, some are CPU mining. So if you're interested in like Crypto9, there's this thought right now that Threadrippers are great because they have level 2 cache. Well, okay, so go bench it. My point to you is when you run your software, you'll start getting your own benchmarks. And this is part of the how you mine to figure out what is most profitable on your particular rig. So these are my numbers. Let me show you how that plays out. So profitability, this is Awesome Miner. And again, this is what you're seeing over here, 6 Gen 1s, 3 Gen 2s. When I did this earlier this week, they were all, most of them were mining Pi. Here's an EquiHash, which is my AMD rig. And then here's a Blake 2S, which is M2 is a test rig that I'm running. So I was running $117 a day, roughly. And then here's how that all works out. So in terms of cost, I'm running 11.8 kilowatts at 0.7 cents, 720 hours a month is about $600. So for a $24,000 initial investment, I'm making about $3,100 a month, which is a little bit less than 8 months ROI. Now, that being said, your mileage will vary. This changes by the minute, and not everything works out this way. So even when Awesome Miner tells you how much money it's going to make you, it's not always right. It's a kind of a guess. But I will tell you that there's a lot of tuning you can do. There's a lot you can do in Awesome Miner to benchmark your rigs to kind of get a better idea instead of taking the raw numbers. But a tool like this will help you understand your profitability and what your miners are doing.
So the 2400 includes conversion from 110 to 240?
No, 240 is native. You're talking about the power calculation?
Yeah, I mean, you had to pay the electrician to come and change.
Yeah.
Then the 2400 includes?
No, because that's all fixed asset cost for my house. So I get to keep that whether I sell the miners or not. So I don't include it. And I also don't include, I think, the new air conditioner this year. But, you know, when I sell my house, I get to keep the air conditioner. So.
I want to ask a really stupid question.
Sure.
Because what you're saying is if you have somebody that's trying to get into this right now, you know, there's a lot of risk. You can blow up your house, you know, start fires, all that kind of stuff.
Those are all upsides. Come on.
Right. But so, you know, when this is gaining so much momentum, right? What do you think the utility companies, the energy companies are doing? Because as you can imagine, this sucks a lot of energy, right? So have you gone to like TXU or to any of these folks to say what kind of, what kind of rate could you give me? And the reason why I say that, I know in Texas it's deregulated, but in California it's regulated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you wanted to do this in California, I come from there. You know, Pacific Gas and Electric would just run you out crazy. So how do you do this with all the power costs?
You move from San Diego to Dallas.
I know, San Francisco to
There you
Dallas.
go.
But I mean, you know, you've got a lot of people. So I mean, wouldn't it be kind of like lesson learned is first off, see how much your utility costs are.
So there's a good question about how profitable is it to mine based on the geography you're in.
Okay.
And so there's two questions that come out of that. What is the cost of power? What is the cost of cooling? So we were talking a little bit earlier about cloud miners. And you see cloud miners open up in Iceland or in China next to the power supply or next to the power generating plant. So people try to answer this question by finding where you're strategic to mine. If you're in San Francisco, you're not going to be profitable mining. If you're in California, I would suggest you're not going to be profitable mining. But that's just because I was a California resident, and I know the problems there. There's a lot of people opening up in Montana and Utah because they have good power there. There are people opening up in Canada. Canada has a wealth of hydropower right now. So there's people opening up in Canada because they can just open their window. So the optimization is definitely around power. How can you get cheap power? How can you get cheap cooling? So it's a great question. I think in some geographies it just doesn't make sense.
But do you see where the utility companies, like here in Texas,
Yeah, of
will
course.
benefit from this? I mean, so they could make some sort of a
Yeah.
market towards folks
Well,
that are in this.
I had a good question about this. I'll tell you from my personal experience, I live downtown Dallas, and I have a great hard loft, and I love living downtown. I almost moved this year. And the reason I almost moved is because I was looking for a warehouse where I could move in and make it into a hard loft like I have now, where I could get commercial power. The reality is commercial power is a lot less expensive. Residential, I don't think you're ever going to get a power company to give you any concessions. But I will tell you, there's power to choose here in Texas, so if you don't know about that, power to choose helps you find the right vendor for you. I'm at 7 cents.
Residential?
Residential.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not
It is not TXU. No. I've had 3 different providers in 3 years
I bet
because
you
of
have, yeah.
trying to do that.
So, in the event that you do, or hypothetically, if you did burn your house down, what do you think is the best type of insurance to have?
The one that pays.
Mm-hmm.
The best kind of insurance. So before I was doing crypto mining, I'm in the IT field. So my HOA or my HO7 policy is well aware that I have computers at my house. I in no way would ever tell them that I was crypto mining.
Yeah.
In fact, let me be really clear. Don't tell anyone you're crypto mining. When you call NVIDIA or EVGA or any of the suppliers you use, do not tell them that you're crypto mining. Your warranty is gone. They will hang up on you. They're angry that you exist. If you have friends that game, do not tell them that you're crypto mining. They will throw something at you.
Is there anything in the fine print yet on the contract?
So I haven't burned my house down. So hopefully my homeowners would pay out. But they do know, and I do have specific riders on my policy for large amounts of computer equipment because of that. Not because of mining, but because of what I do. So it's definitely a consideration.
My first one. So,
Welcome.
In a sense, I don't know. So, you talked about like any PC will have, of course, an internet connection and a hard drive, right?
Yeah.
So, any requirements for those as far as how much?
The shittiest, cheapest box you can find. There's no storage requirements for this. So I've seen people who mine off of USB. I don't believe in that. So I'm an IT guy. So my rig, and I'll go back and show you. That's my rig. It's an ASRock. I started with the H110 because those are the miner boards, and everyone was like, "Oh, these are great boards." I don't really think it makes any difference. My Gen 2 rig, I use whatever I want. I use a really crappy CPU. It's a $40, $50 CPU because it doesn't matter. I put 8 gigs of RAM in because I did. You could use less. I don't think it matters. And I use an M2, and the reason I use an M2 is primarily because I didn't want to have a drive hanging out, a physical drive. I just didn't want to bother with it. There was an M2 slot on the motherboard, so that may have been a luxury. I don't really care. And a 1,000 watt power supply. So that's a pretty bare bones rig. But I've seen people who use old recycle equipment, and I wouldn't have any problem with that as long as it's stable.
So you don't have any kind of like common slot, like server power supplies?
No. These are EVGA's 1,000 watt power supply. And remember, this rig is running at 660 watts. So I don't need anything special.
True.
This rig is running at 1050 watts, and I'm this Generation 2 rig, and I'm using a 1,200 watt power supply. Remember, MD rating for constant mode.
Your PCI bridge, are you running that with a 6-pin?
Yeah, so I run the Molex 6-pin on the Generation 2, and the Generation 1 rig, I still run the old ones, because I went retro them all.
And I think things are going towards proof of stake, proof of work, especially with Ethereum. I don't know what's the timeline and going to that direction.
Yeah.
What's the fate of it for all the people who are? I mean,
their gamer friends will be very happy when they sell them all their GPUs.
Yeah.
So the question is, there's a movement from proof at stake to proof of work to proof at stake. So this is what we saw with Ethereum starting to do this, and there's other coins out there doing the same thing. And the question is, what happens to all the GPU miners? So we talked a little bit, and I'll switch over By the way, there's my Bitcoin address if you want to send me a donation. So this is what we call the difficulty slide, and it talks about how much GPU capacity there is on the network at any given time to mine, and the difficulty, the length of that nonsense that you have to create, how many times you have to do it, and what's called the hash has to have so many zeros. We talked about that a little bit earlier. That's the difficulty slide, right? So as GPUs increase, people bring ASICs online, the amount of global hash power for a specific currency at any given time is computed over, I think it's like a 3-day window, and that's what configures the difficulty. So the question is, what happens when we go from proof of work to proof at stake? This industry goes away. Mining becomes a very different operation. Mining becomes, I have some money, I will put that money at stake to tell you that I'm not going to fraudulently create transactions or new blocks, and if I screw it up, I forfeit that money. So that's a really quick drive-by of proof at stake, but this industry goes away. It becomes a proof of stake industry, which is all I would set up if it were me. I would set up an Amazon Web Cloud box, I put some coin on it, and I let it go. And it'd all leave my living room, and all my friends would be very happy.
But can't we mine other, using the same GPUs, can't we mine other?
Yeah, if there are other algorithms. So the thing about GPUs is they're eminently reconfigurable, right? So if you are chasing the proof of work after things start moving to proof at stake, you can always mine coins that are still using proof of work. And that's when that happens is unclear. So again, if you're looking for a 5-year investment, this is not the industry for you. Let me go over a couple of real quick things. I will taunt you on, so does anyone remember Money Python? Yeah. All right. So these are the links. I put up a couple of things here in terms of this top one is a really good explanation technically if you want to know how mining works. The second one is Bitcoin.org, which shows you actually how to program in Bitcoin if that's what you're interested in. You'll actually learn how the tech works. Then there's some profitability calculators. There's a lot of them out there. These are the two we talked about already, What to Mine and CryptoBuddy. Hardware evaluation. I actually found a good one out there. There's a couple that are kind of dated. If you find one you like, it's fine. Mining tools, Awesome Miner. I use Zpool a lot. So Zpool is one of those tools that we talked about earlier. And then the best blog ever. Believe me, I'm supposed to say it in my Trump accent. My blog is cryptoeconomics.blog. All right, so let me cover a couple quick backup slides, and I'd love to take some more questions. So I use a PDU, and this is a really bad picture, but if you ever want to come see it and look at what it looks like, this PDU, actually, a lot of PDUs are like this. Power distribution unit has 8 connectors in the back, and it shows you exactly how much power you're using, and you can turn off and turn on any of those ports from the network remotely. So my miners don't shit the bed, but if they did, I could log in to my network and power cycle them from this PDU. Remember, my thing is stability. So if my miner goes offline, Awesome Miner will start getting a hold of it and say, hey, there's a problem.
But is there any kind of like auto shutdown or battery backup that you want?
I run naked because I don't have a big enough. The question is, do I run any power backup, anything like that? Yeah, the reality is I don't have a 240 volt 60 amp UPS. And I can't afford one if I did. Yeah, something. There's a diesel generator out back. No, I run naked.
What about surge protection?
So the PDU is surge. Okay, cool. So again, this one is showing 210 volts, 13.9 amps, which is 2753 watts. In real time, running 5 rigs. So if those who are doing the calculation remember that watts is a function of volts. So don't equate. You have to divide that or multiply that by 2 if you're running 120. All right, so that's my PDU. I have 3 of them running, and they are awesome. They are the best investment I have made so far because I know exactly how much power I'm using, and I know I'm not going to bake my equipment. All right, so real quick, I just put this here. This is what a Bitcoin address looks like if you don't already know. Again, any donations? Right there, my friend. The key is not, this is not private. Your private key is private. So you need both halves of that to make that work if you're me. If you're you and you want to donate money, you don't need my private key. All right. So Bitcoin keeps a copy of distributed ledger. I think we already know this. There's a whole thing about the blockchain. As of February 18, there were 507,000 roughly blocks on the chain. So we can talk about, if you want to know how that works, get with me and I'll walk you through the slide. So basically, if there was one every 10 minutes, which is not the way it works, but it's the way that it's designed to work, that would be the blockchain is for Bitcoin is roughly 3,500 days old. So it's a little bit more than that. Usually today a block is about 1 meg in size. So numbers are approximate. So you understand if you keep a copy of the ledger, it's quite large, which is why as miners you don't keep a copy of the ledger, you pool, right? So no one mines by themselves anymore. So you're part of a pool, and the pool has a client out there on Bitcoin that's doing all of that kind of work for you. All right, so we're not going to go through that. So, but this is how it works. So proof of work. If you want to know proof of work, we can sit down and I'll walk you through on the paper and show it to you. All right, so difficulty. People always ask, well, what is difficulty? It's fun. So this is the algorithm. And basically the idea is that in Bitcoin and all of the other currencies that use proof of work, what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a block roughly every 10 minutes. That's your goal. As the global network increases in size and you increase the amount of hash power out there, you still want a predictable timing of blocks. So every 10 minutes you're trying to generate a block. So how do you do that? When you have increasing or decreasing or changing amount of hash power out there, well, what you do is you have a difficulty algorithm that says I'm going to figure out how much hash power is out there, and I'm going to create a suitably difficult math problem so that on a predictability basis, I'll get an answer every 10 minutes. So before we were talking about the nonce size, the reason the nonce gets larger is because you're trying to create a hash, which is the nonce is the random bit. You're trying to create a hash that has a suitably difficult number of zeros at the head of it, which makes no sense other than you're trying to make sure that if you win the lottery, right, by getting that block, that you get paid. So everyone's trying to do the same thing. And that's where the pools come in, because you can't win the lottery by yourself anymore, right? One GPU miner sitting out there on the internet is never going to win. So you pull yourselves together, everybody gets a little bit of the work, and you all try to solve the problem together, and then when the pool wins, you all win proportionally as to how much work you put in. That's a real quick run by, but any questions about that? I know, it's tough. But this is the algorithm, so I can walk you through how that works, but that's if you're math inclined, that's the algorithm there. And people always ask me, well, how many Bitcoins are produced? And so right now, we talked a little bit earlier about the payout is 12.5 Bitcoins per block. This is the algorithm. So, we started at 50 Bitcoins per block for blocks 1 through 210,000. And that was how many coins were produced, and that's roughly the years. And then every once in a while, it gets cut in half. So here's the equation. Here's what the curve looks like. So what that means is, why is this important? The reason I show you these two slides is because, remember I said mining is a very speculative operation. What happens over time is it gets more difficult to mine because more of your friends are doing it. When grandma asks you how to do Bitcoin mining, you know it's getting more difficult because there's more people in the pool. So the first thing that happens is the difficulty goes up because there's more people mining. The second thing that happens is the more coins we produce, eventually the value of that will go down. The amount that you get for mining a block will go down. Right now it's 12.5. It will go to 6.25 soon. Anyone have a more current estimate on this? I'm estimating 2021 based on the numbers I've seen of the number of blocks. So 2020, 2021, in that time frame, we're looking at cutting in half.
The idea though is that it has the reward, but by that point the price might be double.
It might be.
That's sort of the, that's
theory.
Which is why the next slide. Right? So when you were getting 50 Bitcoins per every block, and that was equivalent of 50 cents, it wasn't such a big deal. But as coin value goes up, if it continues to go up, then that's where this remains profitable. Right? So that's why these three slides are back to back. How difficult is it? How many coins are produced? And what's the coin worth? That's your algorithm. So that being said, right now, I'll go back to this slide. It's profitable. Today, it's profitable. Tomorrow, next week, last week, 2 weeks ago, all different numbers. So again, very speculative, but this is how the algorithm works, so you can figure out if it's right for you. I will tell you that the generation, when I built these rigs, the reason I built them this way is because it's not the highest power GPU. It's not. Right now, there's people who will tell you that ASIC miners are great, that 1080 Ti's are great, or 64s, AMDs are great. There's a lot of people out there that will tell you that they have a preference. What I looked for was the quickest ROI based on the power that I had to spend and the money that I had to put in. And I would rather have 100 rigs that are more efficient than 10 rigs that are paying out more per rig. So that's kind of my view. But you get to play with it. That's the whole idea. All right, any more questions?
How frequently do you trade out?
I don't.
So you just hold whatever you
Yeah, the question is how often do I trade out? When I first started, I paid for my infrastructure by cashing out. Now I hold.
So just whatever random coin.
Well, so it depends. When you get paid out, so this guy, Awesome Miner, pays out in Bitcoin.
Okay.
But if I'm running, like for my Ethereum, you can see this one here is running NiceHash, which is kind of a flyer. My Ethereum, I leave in Ethereum. When I run Crypto Night, I just added a CPU miner just to play with it, and it's mining Electronium. It's leaving it in Electronium because it's not worth. So here's the deal: some currencies are worth so little that you're going to lose money today if you were to cash out. Monero is one of those. Monero, if you're mining Monero, it's not because you're trying to cash out; it's because you're holding currency. So for those currencies, I don't convert to Bitcoin. For everything else, I convert to Bitcoin automatically, and I just leave it in the Bitcoin base.
So it's immediately settled.
Yeah. Yeah, I could, when I was converting coin, this money goes into my Trezor wallet, and I convert Trezor into Bittrex, and Bittrex puts it right in my bank account. Go ahead.
Are there any good reference websites or tools available to determine at any point in time what are some of the good things to mine?
This guy right here, the profitability calculators, the two that I would recommend. So for what to mine in CryptoBuddy, you can actually tell it what your cards are, you can tell it what your power costs are, and it will tell you exactly how much you'd expect. Questions? Go ahead.
So I was recently trying to sell some cards on eBay, and a buyer tried to commit fraud on me. So I was just curious if you know, aside from eBay and Amazon, which won't allow me to sell certain brands, are there any websites for people who want to get rid of old cards, go to sell them or trade them? Or?
I will open that question up to
Right here.
I was about to say,
you want to buy it? Okay.
We do.
probably, yes.
But my sense is I don't sell cards, but that's just me. I would say,
Yeah.
because you know what? When you get 100 cards set aside, go talk to this guy.
I'll be better him than some guy in Dominican Republic who wants me to ship
Yeah,
it
no, there's so much fraud.
Before the PayPal payment goes through.
I would probably set up a shop on Amazon for me, but there's probably...
I do. Amazon won't allow me to sell certain brands. I have to get permission from the manufacturer.
Yep. So it's complicated. I would find somebody in the community then, which is your hookup.
Okay.
Craigslist.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Go to a police station, meet them there. Go ahead.
And I even have a snapshot. There are some of the mining posts who are charging really less sometimes. Like I was reading a post on LinkedIn yesterday. Like it was an order of 27,000 Bitcoin, and it charged just $1.57.
That's uncharacteristic.
Bill, can you repeat the question?
So the question, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, so tell me if I got it wrong. Different pools have different fees for what they charge. And some pools have a big fee, some pools have a low fee. So my history is this 1 to 2%. I think if you're seeing more or less than that, your red flag should go up. But like NiceHash, I know was trying to get their miners back, and so they were probably gaming the numbers a little bit for a while because they pissed off a lot of people. But if not 1 to 2%, I think your red flag should go up.
Pretty sure that was the transaction fee stocks for sending that. That's what it was.
Yeah, and then it was like I think usually it's like around 130 per byte.
Oh, because you're talking about transfer fees.
So,
Yeah. So here's the deal. Whenever you move money on the network, there's a fee associated with it, and it's usually rated in Satoshis, and that's about a traditional fee. So if you're paying between $1 and $20, somewhere in there, depending on the service you're using, depending on how much coin you're moving, that's typical. On top of that fee, usually your mining pools take out a certain profit for themselves. That's different. So that's to pay for the mining pool itself. So that's separate from the transfer coin once you have the coin in hand. Two different things. Yep. Does that help? Okay.
I got into ASIC mining for a short while watching the ASIC market. And I've got, I don't know how long you've been, I've got called block eruptors. They were little USB sticks, 330 hash. For some reason, they're selling for like $50 a piece on eBay.
It's because grandma can plug them into.
That's what I'm trying to. Is it just people that just don't know what they're doing? They're just paying. Okay.
Well, let me ask this question.
Make sure I wasn't missing something.
Has anyone seen USB miners be profitable? They are novelty. And so if I wanted to show you what Bitcoin money looked like, and I was kind of I would bring one up and say, look, I plugged it into the wall. It's running on my cell phone charger. I've never seen it be profitable. Just out of a point of reference here, S9, which is the ASIC miner from Bitmain, and I'm sure there's people who can correct me if I got this wrong, but I think there's 135 ASICs per board, and there's 3 boards in it. That's about right. So you're talking about 400 customized chips. They're very small, and they only run that algorithm. And you're running about 14 terahash on an S9 right now. And remember, all algorithms change, so a D3 does not compare to an S9, right? So the algorithms change. So it depends on what algorithms you're running as to whether the number of hashes is comparable. But 14 terahashes are roughly where we're at for an S9. Other questions?
When you talk about the ASIC miners, you talk about S9, S3, just one company doing that, or there are multiple?
Well, there's a couple, and there's a couple here that you can see. So I know Amanda's here. There's another guy here. Gary's here. You guys are doing GPU mining, though, I think. For ASICs, Samsung's been talking about coming out with one. There's a butterfly over there if you want to go take a look at some of the history of it. But S9 Bitmain for Bitcoin mining is sort of the gold standard right now. I expect it will change. And in fact, if you follow Bitmain, you'll see they just came out with a V9, which is their old crappy miner, kind of repackaged. And they just came out with a T9, which is supposed to be more efficient, but it has a higher ROI. So you really have to bench it to see what your ROI would be. It depends again on the algorithm. And remember, we talked about the thing with ASIC miners is they run one algorithm. So if there's a lot of excess capacity on the market, like for S9s and Bitcoin wasn't using it anymore, you would expect to see some coin launch that was using that algorithm so they could leverage the capacity in the market for those ASIC miners. But right now, those ASICs, once they get that algorithm burned into them, that's all they're ever going to do. Okay, other questions? Awesome. All right.